A calling to the priesthood often begins with a whisper. It isn't manifested by lightning bolts and thunderclaps and bedpost shaking in the night. It's just a silent, consistent whisper over time. You are my priest. And in the midst of everything else that's going on in a young man's heart, the noise that surrounds us in the world today, everything else that he feels that he wants to do, there's this constant tug and whisper, you're mine, you're my priest.
This wasn't the original plan I had for my life. I had been in college as an elementary education major, and that's the road that I thought I was going to go down. But when I was in high school, I heard a call from the Lord, and I heard him say to me, John, I know you, I love you, and I have something special planned for you. And at that time when I was in high school, I didn't really know what that meant. So I went back to kind of living my normal high school life. But after that moment in time, I always sensed the Lord calling me towards the priesthood from that moment on, calling me to live a life devoted to him and devoted to the people of God.
It takes a lot for a man to reach this point in his vocational journey. Very oftentimes, the call to priesthood comes and fear rises. And there's a lot of wrestling and a lot of running, but eventually a man reaches a point of surrender where he can't run anymore. And so he's going to follow this call, this whisper in his heart, and see where it takes him.
I battled with that for a long time, but the grace and the peace and consolation that was received when I pursued that is indescribable.
It's humbling because I didn't choose this for myself, but it's God who chose it for me. And I said yes, and said, Lord, if this is what you want me to do, then yes, I'll do it, and I'll be happy in doing it and following you. But sustain me and fulfill me in that, like, Lord, I can't do it alone. And he's fulfilled that promise all the way through. It was a big leap to leave my life in college and the plans that I had for myself and to say yes to God. But when I said yes, an immense peace flowed over my heart, and peace that hasn't left. And the journey of seminary hasn't been easy all the way through, but his peace has sustained and remained with me throughout that time, and that's how I find myself here.
I remember before entering seminary, looking at the program and going, oof, that's a lot of school, that's a lot of education. But 2 years in, I've realized how needed those years are to be formed as a vessel for Christ, and how very thankful I am for the program and just excited for the future.
It's so much more than just being in school. It's not just the academics. It's you're forming your personality in such a way so that you become a bridge and not an obstacle to others encountering Christ. I think of how often as priests we stand in the middle of people's lives. We get called into the hospital in the middle of the night, a room full of people. Sometimes we know them, sometimes we don't. But for a very short time, we stand right there in the middle of all the grief and the pain or whatever is going on. And because we are there, because I am present, Jesus is present. It's a gift that we have through apostolic succession and the laying on of hands down through the years.
That's been a lot of what seminary formation is about, is learning how to put yourself in the midst of people's lives, to show empathy towards the situations that they're going through, to be there in the joyful moments, to be there in the sorrowful moments, sharing in those very intimate parts of people's lives. And so really that's what seminary formation has trained the priest to do, to learn how to be a bridge, to bring God from one side to the people, but then also bring the people over to God as well.
If a man can get his nature right, his personality, if he can learn to be a Christian gentleman, if he can learn to listen well, to be able to pray with and for others well, he's going to be a much better priest than someone that doesn't have those gifts. So a lot of time in seminary is really spent molding the personality of the man to become a bridge and not an obstacle to encountering Christ.
Entering seminary is really the beginning of the intentional asking of the question, God, are you calling me to be your priest? That's what we like to talk about the seminaries. You don't just ask the question, but you live the question. You live it through modeling your life as closely to that of a priest as possible.
I think the advice that I'd give, especially from my own experience, is continue praying, particularly before the Blessed Sacrament in adoration. It's in those places that you'll be drawn by the Lord the strongest, And if, as you continue in prayer, you continue to have this pull towards the priesthood, take the step. Don't just continue to be in this limbo of discernment. Contact your vocation director, because the seminary furthers discernment, deepens discernment in so many different ways.
I think one of the things that helped me with my own discernment was just recognizing that in the end, it's recognizing a desire that the Lord has put onto your heart. And in the end, you will only know by trying it.
I'm just gonna continue loving the Lord, trusting the process, and just like kind of going through it. It's ups and downs like everything else in life, but you really learn to have the Lord as your partner through everything.
A real blessing of the journey toward priesthood is your brothers. Men who go through seminary don't go through seminary alone.
I think that's a big fear for a lot of men who are discerning the priesthood, for a lot of women who are discerning religious life, that they're going to have to go through this alone. But the support that I've gotten from my family, the support I've gotten from friends, my brother seminarians from the Diocese of Crookston, I have not felt alone on this journey.
I would describe the brotherhood between us seminarians as just like at the level of where we're able to be there for each other in our very difficult and hard times, but also in those joyful moments, just knowing that we can always lean on each other for anything.
Jesus does say in the Gospels, ask the master of the harvest to send forth laborers for the harvest. Jesus is still calling. He always calls. It's hard to hear that today in a culture that has a lot of noise. And so to do what we can to help young men and women for religious life to learn to be able to listen for the silent whisper in their hearts, and then to have the courage to follow where they feel Jesus is calling them. Not so much what I want to do, my will be done, but thy will be done.
It's difficult to do, to drop everything and follow him, and I don't think that's something we do overnight. I think we see in the life of St. Peter a struggle throughout his entire life of following the Lord, but the Lord is patient with us. And I think the same is true with our vocations.
God has called and chosen me, and he's using my humanity, but grace works through it. And it's the calling down of the Holy Spirit that imparts the grace that we need. And so one of the most beautiful things about the priesthood is really being willing to let go, to lay down my own plans, and just to respond to what God places before me today. He will pop me right in the middle of somebody else's life, and grace will unfold, and I'll just stand in amazement and watch it happen. What I often tell guys is, in the end, I would have never chosen to be a priest. The fear of not having my own family was something that was very real for me. Now that I'm a priest on this side of it, there's no other life that I would rather live. But it's because this is the life that Jesus has called me to. And where the call of God is, there's joy.
The Lord is calling you to something as well. For some of you, that might be priesthood. For some of you, religious life, consecrated life. But the Lord is calling you to something. And it might be a scary thought at first, but the Lord is calling. He's still at work in the world, and he has work to do in the world, and he needs people to do it.